All right, Minding Your Business community, welcome back. Episode number 208 of the Minding Your Business podcast, entrepreneurship, real estate, trending news. There's no business like minding your own. We're recording this on Monday, the 12th of October, and we're almost heading to the middle of the month already. The middle of October. Before long, it's going to be Halloween, and then we're going to be getting into the holiday season. Just that quick. For those of you that remember, our glorious time back in March when the pandemic first hit and everybody fell in love with COVID-19. And so now we're roughly 7 months or so into our tremendous social distance and quarantine life, those new words that have entered our vernacular over the last 7 months. But all kidding aside, I hope this finds you well with your family and well in your community. And I hope you're ready to connect today with our tremendous guest. Tony Martignetti joins us. He is an executive coach, inspirational coach with Inspired Purpose Coaching, and that's inspiredpurposecoaching.com, where you can more with him. But we're going to talk today about coaching, about development, which is so critical and so on time, right? With today's environment. Many of the people that you see successful and winning, just about all of them, it's tied to some level of coaching. Just like most wealthy people have some level of real estate that they're tied to, right? Most people that are successful, and I'd venture to say just about everybody, had some level of coaching and development. And Tony provides that for his clients and prospects. And so, Tony, thank you so much for joining here on the Minding Your Business podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here. And, especially during this time, it's been, really powerful to be showing up and helping people through the challenges that they're facing.
Yep, absolutely. And one thing I did want to note too, MYB, is that Tony is the host of the Virtual Campfire podcast. And so you know how we are with that. We want to make sure we support our fellow podcasters. So make sure you go get that. That link is in the show notes for you to be able to pick that up along with inspiredpurposecoaching.com. And he's working on a forthcoming book. And so we want to talk about that a little bit as well. But before we get into that, Tony, tell us a little bit about yourself. And we'd love to know kind of your walk and your, inspired purpose for how you got to what you're doing today.
Yeah. So I'll be brief about my background, but I'll just say that I came into the world of coaching by way of spending quite a few years in biotech.
Okay.
I was working on the finance and strategy side of the business. And along that path, I also started my own business, a few of them along the way. Outwardly, a picture of success, although inwardly, I felt empty. There was something missing. There's something about the mountain that I was climbing that didn't feel as though I was on the right mountain. And I finally got to this point where I said, I need to change the path I'm on to find a life that's more fulfilling.
Sure.
And that's where I decided to shift gears and get into coaching. There's a lot more behind that story. But I will say that where I am now and what I'm doing with people, it is my life's purpose. This is what I'm meant to be doing. And it fills me up every day to work with the people I do, to help them to find more fulfillment and to live an inspired purpose, which to me really means to be doing work that fills you every day with joy, but also with a feeling that you're doing the work you're meant to be doing in the world.
Sure. Yep, absolutely. Tremendous and powerful, to say the least, Tony. That's such a career transition. I'd love to, ask you a little bit about that, because you went from a highly technical field where, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, there may not have been a ton of kind of, social interaction and things like that. Maybe, some, I could be wrong in saying that, but when I guess I'm intrigued by your transition from, this walk of this technical path that you have, and then transitioning that into more of a, this kind of social, kind of interaction, when you talk about coaching.
Yeah.
I'd like to dig into that and unpack that a little bit more. What kind of initially really inspired you to then coach?
Mm.
That was it something that you were seeing in people, were people kind of coming to you, where you already kind of had this bug where, you were always kind of coaching and counseling people, or, kind of, unpack that a little bit for us.
I'm happy to. And it's funny you mentioned this because this is something that that I do a lot on my podcast, which is I help people to uncover their stories and see what threads and themes show up. And for me, I found that when I look really far back into my life, I was the creative child. I was the artistic, the one who was like winning awards for being, super creative and painting and drawing and all this stuff. And then eventually along my path, well-meaning adults, they told me, you know what, you're not going to make money doing that. You better find something that's going to be lucrative. And
Sure.
so, I was a smart individual, overachiever. And so I just kind of like shifted gears towards something that could still fulfill me in some way, or at least
Yeah.
seemingly so. And I moved into the more technical fields of, finance, accounting, and, business. And then I was a pre-med major. So I ended up going to medical school initially.
Yeah.
And all of that, what I started to see during my years of being in industry was that everyone would say to me, "You're not the typical finance type person.
Hmm.
You're more of a person who people come to for help, who people want to gravitate towards
There you go.
to figure things out or to hold space for them." And I'm like, yeah, but this is what I do. I get paid to do this, and I'm good at it. So let me
Right.
just get out of my way and let me do my thing.
Right.
Um, but coaching really came from a place of, wait a minute, at the core, what am I? I'm actually someone who's a creative, and I'm also somebody who holds space and understands people.
Yes.
And so if I bring the things that I'm really at the core, who I really am, into the space of what I'm meant to be doing, that's where my inspired purpose came to. It's like, well, I want to build a better world of leadership around helping people to connect with their soul purpose. And what I found is my soul purpose is to be more creative, to be more in tune with people and
Hmm.
not with the analytics and the
Yeah.
scientific part of the world. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and what's intriguing about what you just said and how you were explaining that, Tony, is something that I learned from great coaches and mentors along the way. All of them had a common kind of theme when they were developing me or looking to bring out, whether it's my ball coach, whether it's
mm,
in business, and I didn't share with you, but my background's in banking. I was a
yeah,
17-year banker before kind of starting my own practice, and one of the things that came from that, I remember several different people asking me this question, and I think this is what you came to realize, what I came to realize, and then what you help other people to realize is not just understanding what you want to do, but what you want to be.
mm,
Right. And it sounds like in your story, you gained an understanding of what did you want to be. Right. And that's tough. And like you mentioned with kind of, I guess interested, adults who,
mm,
wanted to drive children, particularly in the past, they wanted to drive children to areas that, generate income. Right.
yeah,
Because, and you can, kind of connect that with the time and place during those times. I mean, in the 70s and 80s when industry started, evolving some, and there were these industries that were being created that weren't service industry, right? That
yeah,
now they're informational industries. And so people were driving kids, to that because they saw, they had the foresight to see that people were doing well in those areas. But what you miss sometimes is that really what you want to be versus what you want to do. So you can have a title of vice president and that sort of thing, and hinge your life around what you do, um, versus who you are and what do
yeah,
you want to be in this world. And that's really what's most important. And so that's what I take away
yeah.
from your story there. I think it's tremendous.
I love it. It's the way you described it made me think of something. And it's just, I'm so glad that we're kind of co-creating this together, is
Yeah.
that it's about, our parents and adults, and I'm not going to call it my parents alone, but
Yeah.
teachers and things like that, they want to craft a way for us to have a life of ease, because they see the struggle that people go through to create a life, that is, it's hard to make a living. It's hard to make a living in this world. And
Sure.
ultimately, if you can, become a doctor, become a lawyer, become all these things that have high prestige,
Right.
that's fantastic. But they don't see the forest of the trees there, is
Hmm.
that in the process of becoming that, of doing that, you're not being who you are meant to be, which
Yes.
is a whole different ballgame. You're forcing yourself down this path of creating all this stuff that you may or may not want to be doing. And in doing so, you're not being who you're meant to be doing, not being, sorry.
Right.
So yeah, it's just something you said that really kind of triggered me on that. And I think that's where it comes from. It's not that they're intending to say, "Hey, go work your butt off and create a life that's
Right.
miserable."
Right, right, exactly. Well, and like you said, and we'll move on to another part of this, but a
Yeah.
lot of adults, like you say, because they saw that struggle or they struggled themselves a lot, they look at, like you say, that's a great way to put it. They want, when it kind of leads to even a larger point of, people, those adults back then, when their notion of each generation doing better than the next, what they're really saying was they wanted each generation to have it a little easier than the previous one,
Yeah.
right? And there wasn't really an end goal to that. Their thought was, well, if you pursue these, kind of professions and things like that, then your life becomes a little easier. Then you can make your kids' life a little easier, and then you can make the next. So everything was about, like you say, that ease and that comfort, maybe with options, I guess, tied
Mhm.
to that. Obviously the more money you have, the more prestige, that sort of thing, creates more options. But again, what they miss is kind of the character of that. And life is not meant to just create more ease and comfort.
Yeah.
Life is meant to, to divulge down this path of, your purpose and what do you want, again, what do you want to be?
Mhm.
What are you? What do you remember it for? Because like you and I both know, coming from the finance world, that those jobs, you die and they're interviewing someone probably before your wake, right? The people come to your funeral after they interviewed someone for your position. That's
Yeah.
life moves on in that. But at the end of the day, what is it really about? And so
Mhm.
that's tremendous. It's a tremendous point to really think about. And again, MYB, as Tony kind of goes down that path on this podcast, I think that's great to add to your arsenal. Your
Mhm.
listening arsenal is Tony's podcast, and so you should definitely do that. So Tony, those early days of you coaching, so you've made this transition. Talk about some of those early, clients. What were some of your early dialogues? What were the, I guess, type of people you were working with? And what were you really helping them? Kind of those early days of starting your coaching, and did
Yeah.
you run into kind of roadblocks or setbacks? Kind of along that early path.
Yeah, so really I'll answer it in two ways, because there's the personal setbacks that I ran into, which is just like, who am I to coach, the imposter syndrome. So I
Sure.
had to first figure out, who I wanted to be as a coach, and
Yes.
really I had to really dig deep in understanding myself before I could get out there and really serve people powerfully, as I like to say.
Sure.
Um, so that journey was my own journey, but at the same time, the journey that I started to see around helping the people I was helping was they're just like me, in the sense that there are a lot of overachievers who have come into this place that they are trying to do so much. I used to jokingly say that I had an addiction to doing, and it was my undoing.
Right.
And so when you're constantly in the mode of like do, and you just keep on showing up and, okay, what's next? And, okay, I got to take care of that. It's like whack-a-mole, constantly whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
And then the next challenge shows up and you're like, okay, well, how am I going to make space for that?
Yeah.
So I helped a lot of people in the early days who were struggling with that cycle of I'm an overachiever and I'm trying to get off this cycle of burning myself out.
Sure.
Um, and I sometimes wanted to raise my hand and say like, yeah, me too.
Right. Right. You and I both.
but
That's
but the
good.
reality is that that's what I, having been on the journey myself and figured out the tools, I felt
Yeah.
like I was the right person to coach them because I understood them fully. But that's not to say that you have to always be like, this is interesting because we had this small conversation about coaching in the sports world.
Yeah.
Not every coach has to be a former basketball star.
Right.
It's about how you create the space and how you create the tools for people to show up and hold them accountable.
Right.
So it's not like I have to coach people who I've been on the same path they've been on. It's
Right.
about how I create the space for them to think, become that
Yeah.
thinking partner.
Yeah.
And then that's one thing that I started to really create an understanding for me is that as my journey continued, I worked with a lot more people who were very different than I was,
Mhm.
and I started to really expand my range and see that I don't have to hold myself back and say, "Well, I can only coach these people because
Mhm.
those are the people who were just like me.
Right.
I can coach anyone I want, and I
Yep.
don't have to be an imposter."
Right. Yep. Exactly. Exactly. And so, as you transition from those early days, Tony, to kind of what you're doing today, how did your coaching practice evolve, and how did you evolve, quite frankly, with it as you gained more experience, as you
Mhm.
engaged more people? Yeah, how did that evolution take place with your practice, and then with you alongside with it?
Yeah. I've gotten people to dream bigger,
Mm,
which is one thing that people show up and they say, okay, well, this is what I want to do. This is like, there's the agenda that they show up with to
sure.
coaching. And just like them, I get them to show up and say, well, what else? What else is there that you really want to create? What's the bigger dream? What's the bigger vision? I get them to dream bigger, but
Yeah.
I also have to dream bigger too. And that's my problem. That's where I had to step out of thinking small.
Hmm.
When I first started coaching, I had these like limited views potentially of where I could go. And
Yeah.
then I started to see that there was something bigger out there. And the
Of
more
course.
that I got uncomfortable, the better life got.
Yeah.
And not initially, I should say.
Right.
Initially,
Right. Over time. Right.
you have to get uncomfortable really first in order for it to get, to expand. And then it
Right.
becomes even more, beautiful, I should say.
Yeah.
I say that word a
Yeah.
lot, but it's true. Life gets really beautiful when you get uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. No, it's a great perspective to have
mm,
in life as you move forward. Like you say, it becomes beautiful in the struggle because, and again, I don't even like to use the term struggle, but through that evolution, right? As life evolves and you face various obstacles that you're able to overcome, that builds the character. And like we
yeah.
talked about with sports, just last night the Los Angeles Lakers won the NBA Finals, right? And LeBron James, in his 17th year, still is performing at an extremely high level, which is very unique, even
Yeah.
for a guy that came out of high school right to the NBA.
Yeah.
I recall seeing his very first game back in 2003, um,
Yeah.
and to see where he is, today. And where there are other players like that too, but for him, it's unique to have been in the league that long, playing professional basketball, and still have that level of skill set and that level of sharp mind. And it really, a lot of that derives from coaching. It comes from coaching and development. Um, particularly, like you mentioned early on in someone's walk, you've got to have coaches that help develop you. And using him as an example, every coach didn't have his background, right? To
Mhm.
your point, that he had coaches and people that helped develop him who, in some cases, had never picked up a basketball.
Yeah.
they were able to connect with the spirit of what he wanted to be, right? And when you listen to him speak, he speaks about not just what he wanted to do. That would be, I want to win a championship. I want to, um, be the best player in the game, those type of things. And those are all great with what you want to do. But a lot of times when you really dig in with when you listen to LeBron and some of his discussions, yeah, he had a great sense of what he wanted to be, what he wanted to represent. And that's where you see him in his kind of social cognizance of when he speaks out against injustices. When you see him working with, putting a team around him of guys and girls he grew up with. When you see, the type of investments, you see,
Yeah.
how he plays the game, on the court, he has a great sense of that purpose, right? What is his purpose beyond, just playing basketball? And basketball, while he strives for that and loves it, it's also a platform for him to impact the world with, again, who he wants to be. And he's got a great sense of that, even beyond his playing career, I think.
Yeah.
That he understands where he's going and what he wants to be, and the impact he can have on himself, his family, and his community.
There's something about that I wanted to comment, if you don't mind.
Please jump in.
Yeah, I mean, when you have that powerful sense of being, it actually creates something in you that helps you to focus your life. It helps you to see that anything that detracts from that is a no, and it's something that you wouldn't want to pull you away. For
Sure.
example, doing things that would potentially tarnish your image or tarnish
Sure.
your, in the way that you'd show up. And there's a quote that I'll bring into this that really is powerful. Is when when you have a powerful goal that you set for yourself, it's a
Yeah.
place to come from and not a place to go to.
Yeah.
So when you are like LeBron, he's got a powerful goal for himself,
Yes.
and he's already there in his mind.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, that's what really kind of sets people in motion. And I think that's really powerful for anyone to kind of take into place. When you say to yourself, look, I want to be this person.
Yes.
And you may not be that person now, but if you act as if you are that person now,
Mm-hmm.
you show up differently now,
Right.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
It just changes your view of the world.
Yeah.
As opposed to saying like, oh, I have a goal to become, skinny, muscular or whatever it may be. And then you just say like, okay, well, I'm never going to get there.
Right.
But the goal, it's kind of like a wish, not a goal. And then
Yeah.
if you say to yourself, like, I'm a skinny, muscular person or whatever it may be. And, but what does a skinny, muscular person do? Well, guess what? They don't eat junk food. They work out every day.
Right.
These are the things I do because I am a person who does this.
Right. Yep, exactly. And Tony, using that as a kind of analogy, transitioning from, kind of basketball with LeBron is, this is a goal that I think many can relate to, obviously listening to this podcast. When you want to lose weight, there's pain involved, right? It's a process. There's not, now, of course, here in America, we look to always, kind of kind of short sight goals and try to get there really quick, right? And there's a lot of times this country is built on, is there appeal for it? But the reality of it is that it takes tremendous effort and tremendous dedication to lose weight, not just for the vanity sake. And that's another piece, again, from America. We often are motivated by outwardly vanity, particularly in today's time of social media, where it seems like everybody's just walking around with a photographer, a videographer, and just so they can showcase things on social media, on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and that sort of thing. But beyond that, there's a process to get there, right? And like you say, there's a dedication. And I think that many people set their goals based on the end result. And then they don't really value the vetting and the process. They don't value the journey. It's just the end destination, right?
Yeah.
They look forward to. And so what happens is when you only focus on that end destination and not the journey, when things along the journey come that impede that, that's where, okay, I'll skip on the gym today. I'll go next week. Or, hey, that
Mm.
big basket of cheese fries looks really good. But I'll work out, I'll go ahead and eat it, and then I'll work out next Tuesday. Right. And
Yeah.
then next Tuesday becomes next Thursday, and then next Thursday becomes Saturday, and then it becomes the following Monday. And then
Mhm.
all of a sudden, you're not on any pathway towards your goal. You get depressed, and and that tends to be sometimes a cycle of people. And that's a good analogy for even in business that,
Yeah.
in business, you have your destination, but you've got to appreciate the journey, right?
Yeah.
And I see a lot of people come to me, Tony, and their goal is to be a millionaire, right?
Mm.
Because they think, going back to what we talked about with adults, they think that's going to satisfy what they were taught as children from the
Yeah.
adults, that if I'm a millionaire, everybody will like me,
Yeah.
um, which is not true, by the way. Um, that I'll be well respected, which is not true, not in every circle, like people think, and it'll solve all my problems that I've got today, right? If I've got cash crunch today, being a millionaire is going to solve those problems, and it's going to create that ease and comfort,
Mhm.
right? Um, but the journey to getting there and making that a goal, one, is already futile, um, just to begin with. But there's a process to get there, right?
Yeah.
To get to $1 million, you have to start with $1, and then $2, and then three. And people don't really appreciate that. They want to jump right to
Exactly.
that million. Do you see that a lot with people that you coach, where they want the fast track to
Yeah.
whatever their end destination is?
Absolutely. And I just want to start by sharing that it's like, I think of this, you've probably heard of Sean Acor,
Yes.
who is the author of a couple books, Big Potential and Happiness Advantage, I think it's called. But
Yeah.
anyway, I always think about, it's like you have to be happy first,
Yes.
and then everything else comes from that.
Right.
And it's not the result, it's the
Hmm.
it's the start. And yeah, I think this is where, I talked briefly about how I'm writing this book called, Climbing the Right Mountain,
Yes.
and how, people climb to they have this idea of what the top's going to look like. And they're like, yeah, I've already got the top of the mountain all mapped out, what it's going to look like, the $1 million, I'm going to be so happy. And, oh, people are going to love me, and, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, sure, that sounds great, but a lot of people climb to the top of that mountain, and they don't realize what they've had to sacrifice to get there.
Mm.
And I'm here to tell you that, because I've been on a mountain like that before, sacrificing your health, your family, your time with your kids, and potentially burnout and depression, all the things that go along that journey. And I know that a lot of entrepreneurs know what I'm talking about when they say that,
Hmm.
like, it's not as pretty as the outside world thinks it is.
Right.
Don't believe all the social media, pictures of like the glamorous life that it can be.
Right.
Sure, some people, maybe there's some way that they can trick the system, but I I would say that they're definitely the minority of the overall picture.
Well.
What I would say is that, be careful of what you see.
Hmm.
Really enjoy the climb, and if you're not enjoying the climb, even the struggles, even the times of growth, because that's what it is, then really question whether you're on the right mountain,
Right.
and whether it's time to take a different path for you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Again, you got to appreciate that journey, and when you have more of a superficial, materialistic type of goal and approach,
Hmm.
yeah, oftentimes what you find is that, again, it's a futile process, right? It goes back to what you and I were saying earlier. What do you want to be?
Hmm.
And someone may answer that, well, I want to be a millionaire, or I want to be a billionaire. Um, but like you said, you don't really understand, what has to be sacrificed sometimes to get there. I've been around, maybe I've never really been around many billionaires, at least that I'm aware of, but I have been around a number of millionaires. And what's interesting is, when you talk to a millionaire, someone who's made millions several times over, Tony, and then like you mentioned, they're not happy, right? And you're trying to figure out, well, why you're not happy. You've got a loaded bank account. You may have, a beautiful spouse. You may have great kids. You live in a great area. You've got, reasonable health and strength, but then you're not happy because because you don't enjoy the journey. That end goal that you've got just creates a lot of angst and, maybe in some cases some depression because they're not doing, or engaged in their, inspired purpose. Right. And so when you're not on your purpose, like you said, you're doing things and they become just routine tasks and you're not really enjoying life. And so for someone on the outside looking at that, they may say, oh, well, you should be happy because you're not concerned about what food you're going to put on the table tonight. Right.
Yeah.
You don't have the mortgage company calling you looking for their money, or the landlord, or you're not worried about your car getting repoed, or if you want to go to Disney World, you can go. You don't have to worry about, am I going to have to borrow the money or finance it on a credit? None of that type of stuff. However, and that may be true, but again, to you and I's point, Tony, what you end up missing is if you're not on the pathway to what you want to be and represent, those things, while there may be a problem for someone else, once you solve that, because even once you get the money, you solve that, you've got other concerns that are going to come. That your problems don't just wipe away because you've got money. In a lot of cases, and many people will tell you, and that sometimes your problems just begin.
Yeah.
when you start loading up, and your end goal is just money, and so you got to focus on that journey.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing that I always remind myself when I do get in that mode of like comparing and thinking of like, I wish I had this, I wish I had that. And it's like, I come back to that moment of appreciation and say, how is it possible that there's people in this world who have close to nothing and yet they find moments of happiness?
Mm-hmm.
It's just this hope that, in their lives, they can just create happiness without anything.
Yeah.
And that to me is just makes me so filled with joy to say like, wow, like I don't need to have anything to feel happiness.
Yeah.
It is something I can create for myself.
Yeah.
I don't need any material things to do that. Now, when you take that person and you put them into the material world, then it creates this like the haves and the have-nots. And that's where this energy of like frustration is created.
Right.
But when if you really take yourself out of your environment for a moment and say, where's this coming from? It's coming from the outside, not the inside.
Right. Yep, exactly. And so you're motivated then by the extrinsic forces of what you envision and see and perceive that other people's do and what you perceive that they have. And you miss your journey of what do you want to be. And so that comparison and contrast constantly brings, discontent, within yourself because, again, you're always measuring. So then you're always competing. And so then one of the things that, let's go back to LeBron real quick. One of the things that, and I have been around even more professional basketball players and professional sports people, kind of through my wall. And one of the things that you'll always notice with them is they enjoy the journey of becoming the best that they can in their craft. Right. And though at least the great ones, they enjoy, it's not just a job. It's not just a gig. It's not just, I get to be the professional basketball player that's recognized and that sort of thing. The great ones appreciate that journey. And they appreciate the work. They appreciate the pain, the extra jump shots they have to take, the extra, drills that they do, the effort that they give those drills when nobody's watching, when it's just them in the gym with a trainer or two. There's no cameras, there's no nothing. And that's where they work to get better. Same with business owners. Many of you that are listening to this are, you're doing your reps, you're doing things that's not on camera, that's not, on social media, that sort of thing, that are really moving the needle. You're engaging in coaching with people like Tony when you're
Mm,
not, working on the business. And so you're working on, and you appreciate that development, and that helps you on your journey. And so what you find is, and I've talked to business owners in this sense, got men and women with little small kind of mom and pop shops that they don't want to grow. They're not interested in being this big conglomerate. They're not trying to be on the Fortune 500. They're not trying to be this world renowned speaker that people are paying $50,000 to come speak and all.
mhm.
They love when they're, a prospect comes in and becomes a customer, and they love seeing a customer that's been doing business with them for 5 years. And they love being able to give back to the community. Hey, we made an extra, profit this month. We want to donate to this call, and those are the things that give them joy. Just those basic things, being able to go volunteer and help somebody. And like you said, they do maybe very modest, they don't keep big bank accounts, but they just love,
Mm,
they enjoy life, and they truly have that joy, within their heart. And that really permeates out to how they deliver to the community. And so,
yeah,
yeah, it's a tremendous thought to think of that, and the importance again of coaching and development
yeah,
that's around that. Because I'll end with this point, Tony, is that, like, many people we don't just come here and just know all this, right? These are
yeah,
things that develop over time, and you have to be willing to accept that coaching and development. No different than LeBron, no different than any of you that are listening to this podcast. Is you have to be open to that coaching and development.
yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to add something, maybe the cherry on top of that, to say,
Yeah.
one of my favorite coaching questions comes down to, shifting perspectives. And it's, what's another way to look at things? What's another way to look at this, situation that I'm in? If you're in this place of like, okay, well, you start to get maybe bummed about the way things are or how things are showing up in your business,
Right.
what's another way of looking at it? If you're the mom and pop and you're saying to yourself like, oh, I wish that my situation was different, I wish it was bigger,
Yeah.
what's another way of looking at it? Maybe you're the best mom and pop in your area and you're
Right.
actually turning a profit, which is something to be like, that's awesome.
Right. Right.
um,
Right.
it's not the revenue, it's the profit that you should be worrying about. And anyways, long story short, what's the perspective that
Right.
you're looking for? So,
Yeah, exactly. Tony, share your thoughts about coaching and development, during this pandemic. As we know that, many have been impacted in many different ways. Some are doing extremely well, where,
mm,
they found, opportunities. They were able to adapt and pivot during this pandemic. And so it brought about, new opportunities and successes, no matter how they measure them, right? Not always measured in dollars and cents and things like that.
yeah,
But, like we talked about this journey, many people have kind of found themselves and determined what they want to be, even during this pandemic. And then others, this has been a huge, kind of kick in the gut, so to speak, of, a huge impact on them personally and on their business. But, kind of talk about, what you've seen in coaching your clients. Has there been a shift that you see
yeah.
now that we're about 7 months or so, at the time of this recording, into this, pathway of the worldwide pandemic? What has been I guess the comparison contrast of impact with coaching?
Yeah. And I guess there's so many ways I could go at this. And there's one thing I would say is, first of all, this has not been easy for anyone. And I don't want to make it seem like, oh, it's so great. This has been
Right.
so great for. No, it hasn't been great. And I think that's the challenge, is to kind of see a different view of this. But there have been some positives that have come out of it.
Sure.
And the way that you do that is by looking at, again, changing your perspective. There's two things I'll say, and I'll make them relatively quick so we don't have to, take up too much space here. But number one is, I've seen a lot of people planting seeds.
Sure.
Planting seeds for the future and saying, okay, what can I do now that will help me to be a year from now in a better place?
Sure.
Planting seeds could be a number of things. Having conversations with people to understand where they're going and where they're headed, where they see trends following, and even where there's uncertainties. It's because uncertainties are clues as to what the future might hold. Um, Knowing what's keeping people up at night is important.
Yes.
So that's all part of planting seeds. The other thing, and this is something I say quite a lot, but I'll say it again, and this is what I tell my clients, is expand your vision, narrow your focus. Expanding your vision is saying, okay, well, if you're starting to see yourself in a place of like, I'm stuck, I don't know what to do, I'm frustrated, I don't know, there's too much uncertainty.
Yes.
I will tell people to step back and look at the bigger picture. What are the things you're not seeing that could be different? And this is comes down to more of that disruptive thinking. Okay, how could I disrupt my way of doing things?
Sure.
Whether it's disrupting yourself, to borrow the term from Whitney Johnson, or to disrupt your business. You know, because you have a business that's brick and mortar doesn't mean maybe you go online. Maybe there's something about that. Once you've gotten all your options, then you bring it into focus and say, okay, how can I execute and narrow my focus so that I'm not trying to do too much? I can only do the next few things. I've decided on these things. These are the paths forward. And sometimes that narrowed focus means that you're partnering up with other people, or
Yes.
delegating some tasks, or doing things just slightly different than you had before. So that's one of the things that I've seen that I'm doing a lot with my clients, and helping them to see a way forward that they hadn't seen before.
Yeah.
In this time.
Absolutely. And what do you anticipate? Of course, none of us have the crystal ball for moving forward, but as the pandemic, this environment evolves to whatever the next reality is going to be, where do you see, coaching and development, particularly among, business owners and entrepreneurs and that sort of thing? Where do you see it going? Do you see, obviously some things can be influenced and are contingent on the environment, right? And in times where people either experience or perceive more prosperity, they have one perspective on things like coaching and development versus maybe other times. I don't know. That may be granular down to the individual level, but again, what do you anticipate seeing with people and as they invest in coaching and development as the environment evolves?
Yeah, I see the field, the environment of coaching, or the trend of coaching, I should say, is really expanding, and people seeing the true value of having that person riding alongside them, and seeing that it's not just for, I think at this point people are realizing that it's not just for the broken people. It's not just for people who are, they're put on a plan and they need a coach. This is for taking people to the next level. I jokingly say, if you're a 10, I'll take you to 11, and I love that because
Right.
we need more people who are really dreaming bigger. And I think that's where coaching is headed. It's more people with more coaches, but also more focused coaching. So not every coach for every person. The matchup is going to be very, very tight in terms of who's for who.
Sure.
Also, there's going to be a fair amount of online type of coaching platforms, things like that. And so that's the trend that we're starting to see more of. For example, I coach people, all over the world, really, with the exception of Asia. I'm coaching people in the UK, California, and South America. And it's really easy to do that remotely because of the fact that you don't have to be, in person.
Right.
So anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. I have a coaching session this afternoon that's virtual, that's set up with a coach of mine that we're going to, what's interesting is we're going to be speaking on, some of the subject that we've talked about already. It's more of, what do you want to be, and kind of expounding on that. And, what that leads to around coaching and development. So I'm looking forward to that this afternoon. And so
Mm,
one of the things that I always like to say is that it's learning is an ongoing skill development, and you should embrace that ongoing.
yeah.
What I saw in the corporate world, the contrast that is, oftentimes leaders, they get to a certain level and they don't value that anymore.
Yeah.
They believe that they only see coaching and development as technical skill, which
Mm,
is for kind of your entry to mid-level worker. And once you get to the C-suite, that coaching and development ceases. That's not needed. Now it's just about me having the vision of what I want to do and what I want to see, and
mm,
not have that mentorship, that coaching and development. And I think that's a huge mistake. And I think that's something that's been realized for many during what the pandemic has brought on. It's accelerated that notion that I'm not on the island and I don't have all the answers,
yeah.
and I've got to be mobile. I got to be able to pivot and adapt and adjust where needed. But that coaching and development is needed for me, even at that level, even at
Yeah.
the visionary level within an organization, whether it's in the workforce or your own business. And so it's a
Mhm.
tremendous thought. It's definitely a tremendous thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, for you, Tony. What do you see for yourself as you continue to evolve as a coach and develop, and what do you think along as you think about that? What separates you as a coach versus others? Because like you and I were just saying, and you mentioned this, as more online coaching develops, it seems like there are a lot of coaches out there, right? Frankly, and there are and so again, like anything, there's some that are really good, and some maybe not so much, and then some in between. And so what differentiates you, if someone's reaching out to you, what could they expect from you that maybe they may not get potentially from someone else?
Yeah, I love that you say that. So first and foremost, the things that are happening for me next on my growth edge, if you will, is that I'm
Sure.
starting to get more into group programs where I'm getting individuals to come together and to really expand their visions together.
Sure.
Because I really see the value in not just it's not in me, it's actually in others, but also me bringing them together and seeing what we can create as a group. Because what I
Yeah.
found is that community is a big, big driver of change.
Sure.
So I've got two programs I'm starting up next year around that. Um, the other thing that that differentiates me, I mean, the thing that differentiates me from others is that I really focus on helping people to embrace what makes them different, what makes them unique, and to really get them to see that uniqueness and to bring it to them, to the world. I want them to speak up loudly,
Yeah.
what's deep inside of them, their inspired purpose. I want them to bring that out to the world and to create that more fully, to be more fulfilled, to have a life that really lights them up. But
Yeah.
in the same time, I want to make sure that it fits with their lifestyle. So that's important.
Yeah.
Um, so
That's excellent. No, that's definitely tremendous. Tony, what are ways that people can connect with you? I mean, this has been a tremendous dialogue, and definitely have learned a lot from you. How can people connect with you if people are interested in learning a little bit more, or maybe continuing the dialogue, or maybe they've got questions? How can they connect with you?
I'm happy to chat. The best way to reach me is probably through my website at inspiredpurposecoach.com.
Yes.
And you can also find me on LinkedIn. You can find my profile there. I think you probably have a link, or Facebook. You name it. Social media. I'm all over the place.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can also
Excellent.
email.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely. So MYB in the show notes, you'll find the website. So definitely go there, connect with Tony, and let him know that you heard him right here on the Mind of Your Business podcast. Tony, again, this has been definitely tremendous. I enjoy speaking with you. You've got a great temperament and how you approach kind of your business, and I think you come off as someone that I think would be a tremendous coach for folks in this community that that are listening to this podcast and then beyond. So definitely thank you so much for that. I look to remain connected, and
Same here.
definitely best wishes to you and your family as you progress. And we'll all get through all these different times together. And if we focus on the things that are important and what we want to be, then things will be, again, just that much better. So, Tony, I appreciate what you do, and definitely enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Ron. Be well.
Thanks, my friend. I appreciate it. Tony Martignetti is our guest today. Inspired Purpose Coach.com. Yep. InspiredPurposeCoach.com. That is where you need to go to connect with Tony. Yeah, definitely would love for you guys to do that. And again, let Tony know where you heard him. ChampronBrooks.com is where you could go to connect with me, MYB. As you know, I appreciate your feedback. I appreciate your thoughts, your ideas, your recommendations. I love all of that. So please keep that coming. Go to ChampronBrooks.com. You can email me, ron@champronbrooks.com. Is where you can email me. Good, bad, or ugly. I'd love to hear from you. And I want this podcast to continue to be a beacon and resource for you. And one of the ways that I can continue to do that is to hear from you. And so I love hearing from you. I will respond. I don't have a bot. I don't have a virtual assistant. I don't have any of that stuff. So when you email me, you'll get a reply from me, and we will engage conversation. Of course, on social media, at champ_ron. That's Twitter, Instagram, and all those different places. But I want to challenge you this week, MYB, that as we start heading towards the end of the year, really think about what Tony and I talked about in today's podcast. Look to maybe reduce some of your social media. We all have a little bit of challenge of that. At times, social media has permeated life so much, but try to take a little bit of time away from it. You don't have to announce it to everybody, but just slowly kind of take a look that time where you're just empty scrolling and you're looking at what someone's doing or their videos, and then that can be okay. But maybe take a step back from it a little bit, and maybe replace 10 minutes that you'd spend on Instagram, and maybe find an article. Find something, engage in something that you didn't know, right? That or maybe about a historical figure. Spend a little bit of time learning something. Spend something within your business, even. Spend time. Call a family member that you maybe haven't spoke to in a little bit, or maybe you have and you need to follow up with. Check on somebody that could be doing very well. They could be struggling. No matter what it is, maybe take that 10 minutes and make a phone call or shoot a text to somebody and just say, hey, I was thinking about you, wanted to see how things were going. I always end these shows and I share with you guys, and this comes from my guy, Scott Kenny. We all want to be a little better for ourselves, a little better for our families, and a little better for our communities. And if we, keep those things in mind as we engage each other, we'll all make this place just a little bit better. So, that's the challenge I'll issue to you. And anytime I issue challenges, I start with myself and then, go out. But just for this whole week, I'm not talking about 10 minutes every day. Take 10 minutes this week and just replace Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or whatever. And replace it with some kind of human in touch, some kind of human interaction. Write a note and drop it off to somebody. Shoot an email, do whatever it is. But let's get back to, we use this term social distancing, but it's really more physical distancing, and we've had that conversation on the other episodes. But socially, we should never disconnect. We should never be distant. We should be able to connect with each other. So I issue that challenge. You can email me, let me know your feedback, and if you've got any stories from doing that, I'd love to hear from you. And if you'd like for me to share it on a podcast episode, I certainly will. I'll even bring you on if you want to come on and we can talk about it. But take 10 minutes, just 10 minutes this week, and connect with a person. I think you'll benefit from it, and that other person will as well. Champ Ron, the Mind Your Business podcast.